Without further ado, I'd like to introduce Pat Toomey.
Thank you very much, Chairman Gleason, and thank you very much to all of you who are attending today. I'd also like to say a quick word of thanks to our host. Tony Salvaggio is the entrepreneur who launched Computer Aid, and he and his colleagues were kind enough to give us this facility for this morning's press conference. Computer Aid's a great company. They do some great work for their clients, both in the business and the government sectors, helping to improve the efficiency and productivity, especially of their technology applications and activities. I'm a big fan of Computer Aid. We need more companies, innovative entrepreneurial companies like Computer Aid here in the Valley and here in Pennsylvania. I also want to welcome President Obama to the Lehigh Valley. I am, first of all, I'm delighted that he's coming to Pennsylvania. I'm delighted that he's going to be here in the Lehigh Valley. I appreciate the fact that he is paying attention to Pennsylvania, and I appreciate the fact that he's turning his attention to job creation, because this should be the #1 priority of this government, of this administration, and it's awfully important here in Pennsylvania. I would suggest there are two huge fundamental problems that are intertwined. Really, they're inseparable, and we need to address both of them. First is the fiscal crisis that has been created by the federal government in Washington. And the second is simply the lack of jobs, the staggeringly high and unacceptable unemployment rate here in Pennsylvania and across the country. First, regarding the fiscal crisis, the truth is it's just a staggering amount of spending has led to unprecedented deficits and unsustainable debt, and we've got to fix this. Think of the litany that we have witnessed in the last year or so. $173 billion to bail out a single company, AIG. $700 billion in TARP money to bail out a whole series of failing banks. Almost $800 billion in a stimulus bill that is not stimulating economic growth or job creation. $110 billion to nationalize 2/3 of the American domestic car industry. $200 billion to bail out Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, and several $1 trillion worth of guarantees for assets on their balance sheets. You know, in 2008, the federal deficit reached a level of $460 billion, and I thought that was unacceptably high. I, in fact, was very critical of some of my Republican colleagues in the House who I thought engaged in too much wasteful spending. I was critical of President Bush for his unwillingness to veto Republican spending bills. I think spending was growing too rapidly then. But what's happening now is a whole different order of magnitude. It's a whole different scale. We went from a $460 billion deficit last year to this year, $1.4 trillion. And it's expected to be at least $1 trillion next year as well. You think about the magnitude of $1 trillion. The federal government takes in something slightly less than $1 trillion in all personal income taxes combined in a given year. So in order to cover just that incremental increase in the deficit, we'd have to double everybody's income taxes. That's how big this is. And these deficits are huge, and they're projected to stay huge as far as the eye can see. This is just unsustainable. And all of this spending, all of this money coming out of the private productive sector and going into the hands of politicians and government is already contributing to job losses. It's actually making it harder for us to grow this economy and create the jobs we need. And we see it in the numbers. Unemployment nationally over 10%, here in Pennsylvania about 10%, and unfortunately, I'm afraid likely to go higher. But that's not all that they're doing. In addition to this staggering amount of spending and deficits and debt, we have proposed legislation that is guaranteed to destroy millions of jobs across the country, hundreds of thousands of jobs across Pennsylvania, if it's enacted. One is this cap and trade idea. This is a very convoluted and complex mechanism to basically impose huge new taxes on energy use. Well, we all use energy. And Pennsylvania is an industrial state, so we use lots of energy. We're a coal state. Cap and trade would be devastating to Pennsylvania, would cost us tens of thousands of jobs. This health care bill that's working its way through Congress, hundreds of new mandates on businesses, all kinds of new expenses. It doesn't lower the cost of health care. In fact, it's expected to raise the cost of premiums for people buying their own health care. And the taxes that would be imposed, new taxes, can only discourage the creation of new jobs. And speaking of taxes, of course, there's a whole raft of new taxes that they're proposing. Tax increases on wages, on business, on capital, on income. this cumulative effect can only have a further devastating effect on job growth. These proposals alone already have a chilling impact on the willingness of small businesses and entrepreneurs to create new jobs. If they actually get enacted, it'll be absolutely devastating. So I have some suggestions for President Obama. As I said, I'm glad he's here. I'm glad he's here to listen, and I hope he'll consider these suggestions. First, we ought to terminate this TARP program. It was ill-conceived in the first place. Some of these monies have not yet been actually spent. We can cut it off now, and let's have a very specific plan to require the repayment of these bailout payments that went to big banks. Secondly, I'd like to see us rescind the unspent and unobligated portion of the stimulus bill. It isn't working. Why continue spending money we don't have? Let's save the hundreds of billions of dollars that can be saved by ending the TARP program and ending the unspent portion of the stimulus bill. Thirdly, I think we really need to consider a cap on federal spending. Now, when I say a cap, it wouldn't be an absolute dollar cap. It would be a tool to limit the rate of growth. Federal government spending is going to grow over time, we understand that. But it has to grow at a sustainable rate. And so we need a mechanism to limit the rate of growth because clearly it's been growing at an unsustainable rate. Now, if we did those things, the many hundreds of billions of dollars we would save would, number one, reduce our deficits, help to get our debt under control. But secondly, I would advocate taking a portion of it and using it to lower payroll taxes. If we had an across-the-board cut in payroll taxes, both for workers and employers, then every worker would immediately get a take-home pay raise on day one. You wouldn't have to worry about whether there was a shovel-ready project. Every worker is ready for a little more take-home pay. It would help their family's balance sheet, help pay the bills, and help grow the economy. And by providing a match on the employer's share, a reduction in the tax that employers have to pay, we'd make it less expensive to hire the next worker. And that's how you generate more job growth. You know, Pennsylvania and America have some very great fundamental strengths that will allow us to recover very, very strongly. We've got the best educated, best trained workforce in the world. I mean, here in Pennsylvania, I know we've got a terrific work ethic. We've got people who want to work hard and be productive. We've got a tremendous physical and technological and intellectual and institutional infrastructure on which to rebuild our economy. We've got a long history of entrepreneurship and innovation and productivity, and that is the cornerstone of economic growth. So I'm convinced we can restore the kind of job growth and prosperity that we need and we expect. We've just got to remember where it comes from. It comes from small businesses and entrepreneurs and private investment. It doesn't come from ever more government borrowing and spending. So my suggestion to the President is end the bailouts, get federal spending under control, no new burdens on job creators, and let's lower taxes where we can so that we can create the jobs that we need. Thank you very much.